Okay.
Welcome everybody to our final presentation of this virtual symposium, our Baby Friendly Initiative Virtual Symposium 2021. And we wrapped things up officially yesterday and had some closing comments, but I'm so looking forward to this session today. And I hope that there are lots and lots of people here. If you've seen, looks like there are a lot of people, if you've seen the rest of the week, or if you're popping on today for the first time, we're here to welcome you. And I'm so looking forward to the session today. And we're going to hear from actually, you know what? First, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to hand over to Monica. Then we'll go on and tell you what's coming up today, because Monica has given us all these little tasty tidbits of what she's about to share. So I'm excited to get to her welcome. And so my name is Claire Gallant. Many of you know me. I'm the parent partner co-lead, one of two parent partner co-leads for the National BFI Quality Improvement Collaborative Project with the Breastfeeding Committee for Canada. And I just am so honored to have been the co-MC for this symposium, and it's just been such a great week. I've been telling everybody that I know about the content and how impactful it's all been, and how it's going to take me weeks to reflect on all of it and then next steps. And it's just been a really, really vital time, and the chat exchanges have been just also really meaningful, and so much great discussion. So I'm speaking to you today. I'm lucky enough to be living in Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq here in Nova Scotia. And I live in Chibuktuk, Halifax. And as I've been saying all week, it's an absolutely beautiful sunny fall afternoon. I'm very, very grateful to be able to live here, work and play here. So with that, I will pass it over to Candy to introduce herself as a co-MC, and then we'll let Monica take the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm also thrilled and honored and excited to be here with you today. I'm Candy Edwards. I'm the other co-lead, co-parent partner lead for the Quality Improvement Project. And I am speaking to you today from Sulikout, Ontario. I live, work, and play on the traditional territory of the Lac-Seul First Nation of Treaty 3. My spirit name is Wabishke Miigwin Ekwe, means white feather woman, and I am Anishinaabe Ekwe from the Anibaguzagagan Anishinaabeg. And with that, I think we'll have Monica go right into our opening blessing. We're all very thrilled and honored to hear from her yet again today.
Thank you, Candy. I just want to do two shout outs before we start. Candy, hearing you speak your language like that just swells my heart up. And to our handsome gentleman, Nathan, who is wearing his orange shirt right now. He spoke a little bit about how they're doing it in their office every Friday. What an impactful way to learn about truth and reconciliation. So hats off to you and to your group of people. So, Atiliai, Monica Munga. Hi, I'm Monica. I am a Nook from Labrador, but I'm living here in Labrador City, currently on the unceded territory of the Innu. And like everything I do in life, we're just going to wing it. I was going to do a Quidlick lighting today, but you know what? It's windy and I'm not going to chance it. So I have something else special lined up for you for a couple of minutes, and it is learning about traditional medicines, especially the ones that you can find here in Labrador. We're going to be talking specifically about the women's medicines because they have been carried down with us from our ancestors for thousands of years. So first in our lineup, I'd like to show you is fireweed. See that?
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Arctic fireweed is traditionally brewed as a tea, and it was given women to help with indigestion, heartburn, upset stomach, diarrhea, like Pepto-Bismol. It's the Pepto-Bismol of the Arctic. It was also really good for soothing labor pains during the time. So we have fire Arctic weed. It can be found anywhere across Canada, and you'll generally notice it by its really tall stalks and pink flowers. They're very similar to lupins, if you know what a lupin is. Yeah, everyone's like nodding their head. They're like, okay, I kind of get an idea. They love disturbed ground, very acidic ground, and you can actually boil down the flowers to make jellies and syrups. We actually produce a syrup that we give to our children to help with sore throats and cold symptoms. So there's that. And of course, my favorite, this is something that my grandfather had introduced me to when I was breastfeeding my child. She's 3 years old and she just stopped in September past. So this here for all of you guys to see. You'll never believe what this is, but this is bear fat balm. So this balm is made from naturally harvested beeswax here in Labrador, and it's made from naturally harvested black bear fat here in Labrador. Black bear fat you'll see used throughout Turtle Island and the Arctic. It is a wonderful medication for various skin conditions. So traditionally, we use it a lot on our children. So what you commonly refer to as cradle cap now was something that we would treat with it. Chafed nipples, things like that is something that we also treat with it. Eczema, psoriasis, cuts and bleeding, all those terrible things that make ourselves and baby uncomfortable. This is the stuff that we use to treat it with. Now, the last one I want to show you is I don't have any here, funny enough, is Labrador tea. I'm sure you've all heard of Labrador tea. Yes? I mean, we are in a place named after it or named with it. So Labrador tea is a beautiful type of medicine. And my great aunt, Elizabeth Rumbold, was a famous midwife along the coast of Labrador. She was an Inuit midwife. And because of her journals and her passed down teachings, she taught us that Labrador tea was a beautiful medicine to ingest both during your pregnancy and after. So during the pregnancy, women would brew Labrador tea for one another, and it would help with the immune system. It would be like a booster. It would help with respiratory problems. It helped as like a muscle relaxer. So it was drank frequently throughout labor. And then after the woman had given birth, she would be set down in a bath of Labrador tea. And this would help cleanse any areas that might have had open wounds. We know that there can be a little bit of tearing and things like that happen. So it was just like a really good detox. And it helped bring her back to her good old self. So those are a few things that I wanted to share with you. I think medicine is very beautiful, especially to women, because we are medicine. Our breast milk is medicine. It's very sacred. And for many Indigenous cultures, we have deities and we have plants and we have teachings all related to breast milk and how it's a provider of life, right? It's connected with water, it's connected with us. So I just thought I would share that with you today, because like all teachings, they're not meant to be kept to ourselves. They're meant to be shared. So I will, I hope that helped. So that was a little information session. I will move on to the prayer right now. So ancestors, I would like to put out this prayer for you today as we lay down offering now. We are in times, dark times. Our Quidlick runs cold and the light dims out. We have many children that are still not with us, and many children in pain. Our families, they suffer. But we want to bring light. We want to bring joy. We want to prosper. And I ask you here today, ancestors, not to only guide and protect the families that are in these situations right now, but I want you to guide the hand of these workers here today as they touch the lives throughout their communities and beyond in our great country, that they understand that every family has a history of trauma that can end with something as simple as a kind word or gesture. Let them know that their path is guided and that their actions pure, and that you give them strength through their darkest hours, as you have given us strength and guidance through these years. And may every drop of breast milk that falls back to the earth nourish our ancestors here and to come for generations to follow. Nakamik. Enjoy the last day of your wonderful AGM. I hope that you've taken some part of it with you, whether in spirit or whether in teachings. And thank you so much for having me. Nakamik. Have a good day, everybody.
think I don't know if we all needed just a minute to digest that marvelous intro to our final day, but that was just very special. Thank you so much, Monica. Just as you did earlier this week, what a remarkable piece of learning we were just able to witness. So so fascinating, and so you just have such a warm way of approaching what you do. We're so fortunate to have you. So I'll hand it over to you, Candy, to let us set us into the day with our introduction of our speakers for our final afternoon. Oh, you're on mute, Candy.
Sometimes I click at one time too many, I think. Sorry about that. Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Monica. That was really, truly beautiful. My heart is warmed. I really enjoyed listening to your teachings this week and of the other elders that we had, that we were blessed with. I also wanted to say that what used to be known as Indigenous Breastfeeding Week is now known as Indigenous Milk Medicine Week, and that ties in really beautifully with the teachings you shared with us. So today we are very, very lucky. We are going to have Michelle Ledrew, the National BCC Baby Friendly Project Director, Jennifer Ustinoff, the Quality Improvement Consultant, and Nathan Nickel, the Evaluation Consultant, and Kathy Bentner, the BCC Lead Assessor, speak to us today. They're going to take us through the 2021 BFI Implementation Guideline, the supporting tools, and give us some information on how to use them. When you're ready, Michelle.
Great. And can you see my slide there?
Yes, I can see it.
Terrific, terrific. Well, thank you. I also am so honored and grateful to have Monica's opening blessing and words of encouragement for our presentation, because we're so fortunate to be able to share our knowledge with you today, and hopefully it will be useful information. And I think back, Candy, yesterday in your closing remarks in your presentation, you talked about, I think, 100 cups of tea. So I think we all need some Labrador tea. I'm going to seek that out when I go back to Newfoundland this time to help with all of our healing and blessings. So I want to start off by acknowledging that I'm grateful to live and work in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, similar to Claire Gallant. I live in Halifax area. And I'll be starting off the presentation, and we'll be doing a little bit of a tag team between Jennifer, Nathan, and I. So today's presentation is really about highlighting what we're very proud of in terms of our BFI implementation guideline, start to give you some of the education and knowledge that you may need to help you how to implement BFI using quality improvement strategies, and Jennifer will take us through that. And then Dr. Nathan Nickel will share his the tools that he's been so adept at creating for us that complements our resources. And Kathy will share some of the educational tools that the BCC has also kind of put together for you to utilize. So in 2017, the World Health Organization went about to create a literature and evidence-based review of the BFI 10 steps. And then based on that 2017 document, they updated the Baby Friendly Hospital Initiative, and they titled it the Implementation Guideline. So in 2018, when the BCC saw this, we were very grateful and anxious to be able to also update our information, but we wanted to really do it well and take the time to update all of the tools and content that we had from the BCC, what we used in the past, and also start to incorporate and learn a lot of the information that we were gathering through the Baby Friendly Quality Improvement project that Claire mentioned. And so that project engaged 25 hospital teams, and they got to use a version of these tools in that collaborative. And so we've been fortunate now to be able to adapt those tools for the BCC as a whole and share that back with all of you. So this new implementation guideline that the BCC has created for you, we will replace the BFI 10 steps and WHO code outcome indicators for hospitals and community health services. So that document that you've been familiar with all of these years, we've now will be replacing that. But there will be some transition and time for support to make that happen. I want to take a moment to thank and recognize the tireless work of the working group that created these document and many of the tools. So Marina Green, Marg Lascelles, Kathy Venter, and myself have met many hours over the last few years. But we didn't just create it in isolation. We were able to do consultation with the Breastfeeding Committee of Canada's board, assessment committee, provincial territorial committee, as well as reaching out to the public and our stakeholders to get feedback through a survey design on the content of the implementation guideline, as well as some of the language. We also sought out feedback from parent partners, and Claire and Candy in particular provided detailed feedback for us in terms of having a review from a parent perspective. Does not want to advance. Okay, here we go. So with the 10 steps to successful breastfeeding, you'll see that it's divided into two primary sections. So the top section with steps 1 and 2 are referred to the critical management procedures, and then steps 3 to 10 are the key clinical practices. And so in particular, step 1 has been broadened to include the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes. And previously the code was more of an addendum or in addition to the 10 steps, and now it's given its rightful prominence to be within the 10 steps. We still have the policy being part of step 1, but also in addition, for step 1, the inclusion of BFI monitoring and data management systems is now part of step 1. We'll go into a little bit more, Kathy will explain a little bit more around step 2 and some of the competencies, and then the rest are the clinical practices that will be familiar to you. All of this should be familiar to you, but it is updated based on the evidence and aligned with WHO. So I just want to review some of the major shifts and changes from our previous version of our BFI documents. So in 2020, in addition to what was in the 2018 document from WHO, this past summer in 2020, WHO also released a document that focused on BFI and small, sick, and preterm infants. And in the past, we would really focus on healthy term infants or infants over 37 weeks. And so now we know that there is actual benefit for small, sick, and preterm infants to receive evidence-based care that the BFI initiative provides us. And so that will be something that we will transition over time. And we were fortunate to have NICUs involved in our BFI collaborative project, and we know that there can be improvements in that area in particular. The next major shift is moving towards staff competencies. So knowing and assessing and addressing staff competencies related to their knowledge, skills, and attitudes is now the focus, rather than requiring a specific curriculum or number of education hours. So like I said, Kathy will tell us a little bit more about that at the end. We also, in alignment with WHO, we're really encouraging organizations to align BFI within their organizational quality improvement strategies, whether that's part of your organizational strategic goals, maybe your quality improvement scorecards, maybe it's included in your accreditation assessments and review. So Accreditation Canada has worked in partnership with us through the past project, and so there's a lot of alignment with this work and Accreditation Canada. We also updated all of the steps based on current evidence. So for example, step 9, there was evidence related to pacifiers, and more of a focus now on education, informed decision making, and appropriate use of pacifiers when indicated. There's also alignment with international targets and meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. And we introduced a term that WHO has used and referred to as Sentinel. And so in our document, we have identified Sentinel standards for step 4 and 6 in particular. And these are fundamental standards that are crucial for BFI, and it requires routine monitoring. So the Sentinel standards for step 4 includes early initiation of breastfeeding. So within that first hour, it includes skin-to-skin care and monitoring whether that happens as within the first 5 minutes and sustained for at least an hour after birth. But also indicators related to exclusivity at hospital discharge. And for the community health services, we've at the BCC has created an indicator for Sentinel indicator for rates of exclusivity at 6 months. So you can find all of these details within their implementation guideline document. We also aim to be inclusive in our language, and that means trying to be trauma-informed, family-centered language, and moving towards more inclusive gender inclusive language in our document. So the Baby Friendly Initiative guideline refers to both the hospital and community, and it includes the Canadian context of that whole continuum of care. So what we've done is taken the WHO standards and then expanded them for hospital and community. So you'll see that we have 2 icons here, one for hospital and one for community health services. And so each standard would have that denoted. For most of the standards, it applies to both hospital and community, but there are a few standards that would be specific to the hospital only or specific to community only. So you'll get to see that, that denotion there in the left-hand column. I'm just going to show you an example here from, this would be a clinical standards. And so in our document, we have the implementation guideline divided into 2 main sections. So the first section provides overview of the 10 steps, which you've already seen. And then this is a detailed table with all of these standards and all of the content for each step and standard. So in the left-hand column, again, you will see the area, so hospital and community. Then you'll have the actual specific standard that's required for BFI designation. Then we have a column for the target. So what are you aiming to achieve? And so we want it to be very specific about that to help you. And then the next column, we have suggested monitoring sources. So whether it's primary sources or additional sources that you can start to gather data or information to help determine whether or not you're meeting the standards. And so these tools that were being referred to in this column is what we're going to further expand upon in this presentation today. In the right-hand side, you'll see that there's a larger column for progress notes, and that's an opportunity for you as a team to identify what your gaps are, what actions you need to take to make improvement, and be able to kind of jot down those notes and use this form that we have on the BCC website, which is in a writable PDF. But in addition to the writable PDF, we have these Excel forms, which Nathan will describe in more detail. The second section of the BFI implementation document provides content around quality improvement. So many of you may have had experience using quality improvement strategies, but we wanted to give you some content, some ideas of how to use it for a BFI context. And so there's content on that. There's also content on the tools in terms of the BFI journey. So it's all succinctly hyperlinked within that document. So you don't have to be looking across multiple different documents. And that's what we're going to be focused on next here today. And then the last section is on implementing improvement changes. So I'm actually going to now turn it over to Jennifer, so Jennifer can provide some education and knowledge, her wisdom on doing quality improvement, and then we'll bounce back and forth. So Jennifer, I will just advance your slides. You just let me know when you're ready.
Okay, thank you so much. I hear a little bit of an echo. I hope that doesn't continue, but I first want to join in my land acknowledgement, and I want to thank my daughter Stephanie for preparing this for me. I was born where the land and the water are traditional homeland of the Ojibwe Nation and the Wendat Nation, now including communities from the Potawatomi nation and known by settlers in the Williams Treaty of 1923 as Haliburton, Ontario. I currently reside where the land and the waters are the traditional homeland of the Abenaki of the Missisquoi, part of the Wabanaki Confederacy, known by settlers as Essex, Vermont, in the Downland Confederation territory. I recognize the enduring presence of all Indigenous people on Turtle Island and in all lands where teachings agree to share and care for the well-being of land, water, and all of our relatives, human and more than human. Thank you. So today, I want to add to this conversation and bring you some tools and some maybe reminders of some improvement tools that are helpful when you start an improvement project, no matter what it is. But these are the models that and the tools, the foundational quality improvement tools that we used in the national collaborative. There are very many tools that can be used for quality improvement. These are just a few. I have found over the years in working with quality improvement that these resonate a lot with people. I think they just kind of make sense. They're simple. And so I'm hoping today you'll be able to take some of that away. Next slide, please. In 2007, Batten and Davinoff wrote an article, and a quote from that article that I love is, "Everyone in healthcare really has two jobs when they come to work. The first one is to do their work, and the second one is to improve it." And often we talk about high quality care. I think that's what it comes down to. I've been a nurse for many decades, and we talk a lot about change fatigue, and we've got another fatigue that's daunting us right now. But we talk about change fatigue, and often I've walked with people who really don't expect to need to change. And so I love that quote because it's we need to come and do a good job, but we also need to improve upon the job. And that's really what quality comes down to. So there are three elements of quality when we think about quality improvement. The first one is the will to do what it takes to change or improve a system. So think about the system or systems that we work in. There are very many of them. There's a system in the day that we work, the people that we work with. There's a system in the unit or the clinic that we work in. There's a system that's regional and provincial. So there's tons of systems, and the impact of all those systems are what we need to consider. And so we really do have to have will. We also have to have some ideas on how we might be able to make changes to improve our system or our practice. And then, of course, we need to have the know-how. So we've got all these ideas. How do we actually make a change that is significant, impactful, and sustaining? Next slide, please. So I want to take a moment and differentiate the difference between two phrases, quality improvement and quality assurance. And it isn't either or, it isn't one versus the other. It's really that they're very different. We're going to focus on quality improvement today, but quality assurance is something that a lot of us have had experience with. So first of all, there's a difference between these two, because quality improvement really focuses on the system, whereas quality assurance focuses on what the individual is doing, how they're carrying out what they are required to do. In quality improvement, we recognize that human beings are going to make mistakes. Quality assurance really expects perfection. Quality improvement is about teamwork. And if any of us know, if we need to make a change, we need a team. Even if it's a personal change, we need a team behind us. We need our family to help us. We need a coach to help us. And so teamwork is really important. There's a really big distinction between how we look at the data that we collect in quality improvement versus quality assurance. In quality improvement, we really look at it and say, okay, this is about improvement. So what can we learn? What's the story behind the data? In quality assurance, we use it to make a judgment, whether it's good or bad, whether that person needs to fix something or not fix something. And then there is this case about error, and this kind of comes down to a just culture too, whereas in quality improvement, if we make an error, we see that things aren't going as well as we expected, we look at that as an opportunity not only for learning, but for improvement. Next slide, please. The model for improvement has been around for several decades and is used as a foundational model, and one we used in the collaborative to really frame our improvement. We have to start somewhere, and it organizes us, and it makes us be very thoughtful about our approach to the improvement, so that we start out right on the ground level at making a really good choice of where we're going. And so the model for improvement has 3 questions that we ask ourselves as we begin to design an improvement project. The first question is, what are we trying to accomplish? What do we want to do here? The next question is, how will we know that a change is an improvement? And we all know lots of changes don't make an improvement. And these changes need to impact our aim. That's what we're really looking for, that the change is making an impact on what we're trying to accomplish. And then the last question is, what changes can we make that will result in an improvement? And that's where the plan, do, study, act cycle comes into play, so that we can take those change ideas that we collect and we can test them. We just don't say, oh, that's a great idea, let's do it. We actually need to test it and find out how it fits in that system or systems that we're working. Next slide, please. Next slide. Is it frozen, Michelle?
I'm on the slide. What are you trying to accomplish? Is that what you see?
Now I do. There
Okay,
was a
just took a
delay.
while. Okay.
Yeah, a delay from Halifax to Vermont. That's great. Thank you. So let's break those 3 questions down a little bit. A name. I think all of us can relate to the fact that we want to set a goal. When we have an improvement project, we want to set a goal. I want to take a moment and just say how powerful that is and how important it is. I am someone who wants to rush to make a change. And so this is something that a name really reminds me that I have to articulate what it is that I'm trying to do. And this graphic shows us that it has such a ripple effect. We can start with a goal or an improvement project in our clinic, community setting, in our hospital unit setting, and then think about how that has an effect broadly. It can align with a name that is going on in the hospital already. And when Michelle was talking about aligning breastfeeding improvement work with the strategic improvement across your organization, that's what this is about, really aligning it. And then it can go even broader to what's going on in the region or the province or even an entire nation around a certain improvement project. So, you know, we can start small and locally, and it can have that ripple effect. But the aim should be simple and translatable to everyone. Next slide, please. So all of you have probably participated in some way or read a goal or a name statement, and we often go to the acronym of the SMART goals, which is a great way to do it. That an aim needs to have components in order for it to be strong and a real foundation for your work. You need to be able to simply articulate what you're trying to accomplish, for whom, by how much, and by when. So here's an example. By May 2003, we will improve in breastfeeding rates in teen moms by 15%. Talking a little bit about that goal of what's achievable and realistic. We want to stretch ourselves a little bit. So you might have said, well, this is our aim statement, but you know, let's be safe and say 10%, because I know we can get but to 10%. But then someone else on the committee says, let's push ourselves a little bit. Let's try a little harder. Let's stretch it and see how much farther we can go, but not make it unrealistic, like 50%, because we know that's not attainable by this date. So that really having a conversation about what's realistic and what's achievable, but a little bit of a stretch that makes a few of us a little bit uncomfortable, is a good place to land. Next slide, please. So the next question, how will a change, we know that a change will be an improvement. I can think of so many times that I have embarked on an improvement project in my personal life. And a lot of us relate to better exercise, or another one is a commute to work, right? A better way to get to work. Maybe it's a little more scenic and the traffic's not so bad. There's not so much construction. And we try these different routes to get to work. And we need to find out, is that actually an improvement? Are we getting to work late every single day? Or is there something else that's driving us crazy? Because for me, it would be the speed limit. I have to go too slow on this route. And so I like to go a little faster. So we all think about these different changes, and we want to make sure in an improvement project, we have limited time, we have limited resources wherever we are. And so we want to make sure that we really focus in on all the changes and making sure that they are an improvement and they're impacting our aim. Next slide, please. I'm just having a little delay here. There we go. So this is kind of about measuring, you know, because if we want to know that a change is an improvement, we have to measure it in some way. And the purpose of quality improvement is not really about learning, about measuring and judgment. It's about learning, but we can measure and learn at the same time. And so how do we look at how we measure those changes to ensure that they impact our aim, and also know that measuring in a system is only one way of assessing change. It's only one voice of the system. So we can't get too focused on the data. We have to also think about the people. And so remember, we have qualitative and quantitative data, meaning numbers and words. And so it's really important to think about measuring both of those, because there's what one gives, the other one doesn't. And so together, they really give us a true picture of how our improvement work is going. And also they give us new ideas along the way, because we have conversations about the data we've collected. And what we want then in quality improvement is for our data to tell a story and to spark ideas to continue the improvement. Next slide, please. So here's a really dense slide, but I want to throw this in, and I'm not going to walk through it in any detail. I want to throw this in only because in all the years that I've worked in quality improvement, one of the tensions that often comes up, and Nathan, even I kind of chuckled about this when we were talking about this presentation, that those of you who have a research background, quality improvement feels kind of messy to you. It's not as exacting. And that's true, because it's about improvement. It's not about exactness. It's about improvement over time, not in the moment. And so for those of you who are researchers, or those of you who work with researchers, and almost all of you do, this is a great this is a great slide to pull out of this deck and be able to talk through how it's different, how the aim is different, how measurement is different, how we determine improvement is very different in quality improvement versus research. And then in the middle, accountability. So I give that to you for reference. Next slide, please. In quality improvement, there are several different types of measures or indicators. Outcome measures, those are the long term, like improving breastfeeding in our hospital, the rate of exclusive breastfeeding. That's an outcome measure because there are so many things, so many strategies, so many factors that feed into it, and it takes time, quite a bit of time to make that change. So an outcome is down the road. Process measures are the things that feed into that. Our practices, for example, skin to skin, being able to measure how many moms get skin to skin within 5 minutes of a vaginal delivery. That's a process measure. And we know that in the literature, that would feed into our outcome measure of exclusive breastfeeding to improve exclusive breastfeeding. Balancing measures are often used in quality improvement because they help us understand if we make a change here, what will it affect there? And because we're looking at the system, then we want to make sure that there isn't a downside to a change that we're making. One of the examples we often use is surveying moms in an office setting or in a clinic setting. And if it takes them a long time to do the survey and that backs up your whole day and they're not getting to the appointment quickly and there's some dissatisfaction from staff, there's definitely dissatisfaction from the moms because they want to get the appointment done, then that balancing is, you got to decide, is the benefit worth the downside of what's going on. So it's often important to think about, do we need a balancing measure in there somewhere? Structural measures are those surveys of staff, how's it going? Surveys from moms and families, feedback, any kind of feedback, that's an example of a structural measure. Always, 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 when we create measures to collect data, make sure you ask yourself, is this going to be usable data? Because we don't want to collect data just for the sake of saying we're collecting it. If you can't use it and you're not able to share it with those who are helping to impact the change, it's not useful. Next slide, please. Last question in the model for improvement is, how will we know that a change will result in an improvement? And this is really important because of what I said before. Tons of changes might not really help to impact what we are trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. I'm waiting for my delay.
Sorry, it's up on my screen, Jennifer. Do you see it yet?
Not yet. Not yet. Sorry. I'm going to go to my slide deck that I have here and tell you that what this slide says is why we use a PDSA. And I know I'm going to tell you that for years, when I saw PDSAs and when I was working on the front line as a clinical nurse full time, I would run the other way. That was something the quality department did. They had poster boards up, and I honestly, to be honest with you, didn't even pay attention to them. the message I want to give you in a very brief way today is that PDSAs do not have to cause PTSD. I think often we spend too much time on them. They were designed, as was the model for improvement, to make rapid change. PDSAs are supposed to be fast. You can actually run one in an hour, get the information back, and plan the next one for the next day. They really are low risk because you're thinking about, you're not testing something that has a ton of risk to it. You're testing an idea and you're thinking it through. It can be tried for anything. I've tried PDSA cycles at my house. You can try them to try a PDSA cycle to get your teenager to clean up their room. I've tried it for getting my husband to actually not put the dishes in the sink, but put them in the dishwasher. I won't tell you how that turned out. And so we really can use PDSAs to help us build momentum, because we can start to see whether a change idea is working very quickly, and it builds excitement and momentum in our improvement work, not only for the planning group, but also the staff that you're hoping to engage. It also decreases resistance. Now, you might say, how could it do that? It's because if you use a PDSA cycle properly, you do start small with one person, two people, one mom on one day, and you test it and you see what kind of information you get back from that. You tweak it. Then in a week, you test a few more people you involve. You test it under different conditions, like different days, different nights, weekends, all these different conditions. Then you gradually bring in all of the people that this change will impact. Next slide, please. And I did get that one up eventually. All right, so the next slide talks about a PDSA cycle. So you've all seen this, and I'm not going to go through what each of the categories are. What I want to tell you is the really cool thing that I've learned over the years is each of us fall into one of these categories that we truly love. Some of us love to be planners. We need someone on our improvement team that likes each part of this PDSA cycle. We need planners. We need the doers, that's me. We need the people that love to study the data, the information they're getting back. And we love the people that will be able to get a synopsis of all that and say, okay, here's how we can tweak it, and let's test it again until we get to the point where we feel really comfortable for implementation. If you have too many planners, you don't do. I'm just going to tell you, you just are spinning your wheels. You're planning. No. Let's have another meeting. Let's plan this again. We can't test this yet. We're not ready. So be careful of that. If there's too many doers, you don't plan well enough. You don't study. You just want to do and get on with it. The studiers, very, very important, because they collect that data. They tell us, what did we learn? What did we find out that was unexpected? So we get that from people just giving us feedback on how that test went. And then the actors, very important, because they ask the questions, are we ready to adopt this? Should we adapt the change a little bit, try it again? Or does this change actually not work? And we can abandon things if we've tested them, and we can prove that that change actually wasn't very impactful for what we were trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. So PDSA cycles, as I said, they can happen. You can ramp them up. You can let them grow, let them be tested under different conditions, and learn as you go. Don't forget to study. Get back the information. What did we learn? What happened that we didn't expect? Because that's the only way you can gradually test through to sustaining a change idea and knowing it's going to stick. Next slide, please. So common hangups with PDSA, and this is my last slide before I hand it over to Nathan. People start too big. I've got this big idea. We're going to change X, and so let's do this. We often say in quality improvement, think of the 4 steps that are involved in that idea and start with the first one. Scale it back. Start really small. You don't have to, remember, improvement happens over time. You have time to do this. And then implementing too quickly. We don't test enough under enough conditions, and we jump to implementation. The risk of that is that change doesn't sustain. And then one of my little things that I always like to talk about is I see people testing tasks all the time. So ask yourself, when you have a list of where you get those change ideas from, all the people that this will touch, this change will touch, in your department, in other departments, all the different stakeholders, get all those ideas and decide, is this a task or a test? A task is setting up a meeting. That's a task. You can test what time of the day works best for everyone, but you can't test setting up a meeting. Revising a policy is a task, but if you want to test how well it's being adopted into practice, you can definitely test that. I hope that was helpful. Remember, talking is not doing. I do a lot of talking, but we have to move to doing. So remember that PDSA cycle, figure out the personalities on your team, and make sure you have someone that will move you from planning to doing and then stop you to study and act. Nathan, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. I love that description of having different folks on the team. I wonder if anyone was doing like me and thinking, where on that pie chart do I fall? I'm definitely not in the doing and acting side. I much more enjoy planning and studying. So it's probably why I chose my career path. So just wanted to give you a heads up here about this table. You can click on links for the different tools that we'll be talking about and different forms that are currently being developed. Before I get into my presentation, though, I want to just situate myself and practice some reflexivity. So again, my name is Nathan. My relations personally go back to many different parts of Turtle Island. And through my relations, I'm of mixed heritage. So I claim both European ancestry as well as mestizos ancestry. And I'm a queer man where my partner and I are both guests here on Treaty 1 territory. And I'm looking outside my window, and Treaty 1 today is just so beautiful. It's lit up with colors in the trees, and really, really, really privileged to be guests for the traditional stewards of this land, the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Oji-Cree, the Dakota, and the Dene peoples, as well as the Métis Nation. My partner and I, we both pay a lot of respect and honor to the elders that are from these nations and these communities, the grandmothers, the aunties, the traditional knowledge keepers, and we pay our respects today to them as well. A lot of the work that we're talking about here is really being done in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, supporting the establishment of breastfeeding during the hospital stay, supporting moms and babies to have that beautiful, healthy, loving celebration start to life is really at the focus of what we're doing. And it's done in a spirit that responds to the atrocities that have taken place on this land, and quite frankly continue to take place here in Treaty 1 and across the rest of Turtle Island. And so hopefully the work we do will help us move towards achieving the calls to action that were outlined in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report. So thank you very much for allowing me to share some of the work we're doing today together. Next slide, Michelle.
Yeah, and Nathan, I'm just going to interject with about this table.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Just to situate it a little bit, because this table was pulled from the implementation guidelines, so it's table 2, and it has all those hyperlinks in that document as well. And so we've broken it down into 2 columns. So the tools that will be applicable to hospitals, tools that are applicable to community health services. And so that you can kind of pick and choose depending on where you work. Some of them are the same, like the medical indications for supplementation, and we base that on evidence from WHO as well as Academy for Breastfeeding Medicine and CPS. We have a BFI guideline checklist, which Nathan is going to demonstrate and show today. Kathy will speak to the toolkit, which is the competency toolkit from WHO. And one of the key aspects of a baby-friendly work is always hearing from patients and families. And so while data is really important to have from our chart audits and other aspects of data sources, hearing directly from our patients and families, whether they're in the hospital or community. And so we've developed these survey tools based on the standards. So you'll be able to use these tools and adapt them as you like. And then Nathan's going to talk about some of these other forms and Excel tools that I have. And so you're going to get a sneak peek of that, but those documents aren't quite live yet on our BCC website. So you're getting a sneak peek today. So I will turn it over to you now, Nathan, to give us all that detail.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. And one thing I wanted to also say is this slide here is an overview of the different tools that we're going to be talking about. Before I got into the field that I'm in, where I deal a lot with data, whenever I heard the word data or thought about numbers, my eyes glazed over. So if you are like me, something that really helped me become a lot more excited about data were two different thoughts. One is, if we think about epidemiology, which is where we study health using numbers, one of the key components that was shared with me is the idea that all that epidemiology is the story of human lives in graphs and in table forms. And what the tools we're providing you here are ways in which you can actually start to collect those stories, the stories from the families, the stories about the experiences during the hospital stay, the stories as families come into contact with your community health center, and then you can use those stories in order to implement some of the PDSA cycles that Jennifer was just talking about. So we'll talk about the checklist, the implementation guide, and a couple of other audit tools here over the next few slides. Next, Michelle, please. Great. So this first is simply a checklist. It's an editable document where you can identify those different parts of the guidelines that you're currently following. So for example, if all staff are able to explain how the WHO Code of Marketing protects them from conflict of interest, then you would click on yes. If it's still a work in progress where you're still engaging in training or in information sharing about that, you might want to select IP, which would represent in progress. Or if you haven't even started down that path of discussing the WHO Code of Marketing with your staff, you might select N for no there. And this is just a really quick high-level way for you to be able to start to think about where your facility is at with respect to the different guidelines and check off where you're doing well and where you might need some additional improvements. Next slide, Michelle. And so that's what the yes, no there means. We've also provided a nice summary that illustrates and outlines where the implementation guideline has come from. So when you download this from the web, you'll be able to situate yourself within it. Next slide. And then alongside that, we've made an Excel spreadsheet. And so what you'll see here is with each standard is in column C. In column D there represents whether or not you've achieved the target. Next slide. Yep. And then you'll be able to click there whether or not you've met the target for each of those different standards. If you click next, Michelle. So, oh, yep, nope, that's right. So, for example, if you're looking at that first standard there, all products covered by the WHO Code of Marketing have been purchased in the same manner as other pharmaceuticals and food and not received through free or subsidized supplies. There you see that you can identify, yes, we've achieved that target. No, we have not, or we're still in progress. Next slide, Michelle. Yep. Okay. So that'll be that's a drop down menu that you can click. Next, Michelle. Oh, sorry. Yep. And so, nope, go back. And so what you'll see there is once you're able to click yes or no, if you click on yes, that standard will highlight as green. And so really quickly, if you're a color person, I like colors, you can identify by looking through all of the standards for a specific step where you're green, i.e. where you've achieved the target, where you're yellow if it's still in progress, or where it's red, you haven't begun. Next, Michelle. So here what I've shown you is what it will look like once you start to identify where you're at with each one. So in this hypothetical example, say I am working in a facility. We've done well with making sure that all of the products are purchased through a regular means. We haven't even started the process of the independent run business operating on facility sites, have no displays, promotions or free distribution of products covered by the code. So maybe there's still those like gift baskets that include infant formula in them. We haven't even gotten there yet, but we're in the process of working on the next there, which is why that's identified as yellow. Once I've gone through all of the guidelines within a step, we can then sort and identify. I'm only going to select out on the bottom there those that where we've are in progress. So next. Oh, never mind. Sorry, go back. And so if I deselect all of the other ones, only have the in progress, it's only going to show or present those guidelines that are yellow. And in that way, I can really quickly see where do I need to be focusing on as a facility. So this is just meant as a guide for you to be able to look at in a really quick way at a really high level where you're at. Next slide. Okay, so next we have a chart audit user manual, and this here is something that the quality improvement project that Michelle, Jennifer, and I, and Claire and Candy have been working on for the past couple of years to support the implementation of the 10 steps. Part of that process has included tracking practice of the progress towards implementing the clinical practices that are included in each of the 10 steps. One of the ways that you can do that is to do a chart audit. And so we've created a manual and a tool, adapted it from that project so that you can monitor your progress on your own. Next slide. So what you'll need to do is take a selection of 30 charts for dyads where the baby was not admitted to the NICU. If you have an NICU, then you can also take a random selection of up to 10 charts for where the baby was in fact admitted. If you have fewer than 10 babies admitted in any month, then just take an audit of all of those charts. Likewise, if you're a smaller facility and you've had fewer than 30 births in a month, you could, if you want to, audit all of the charts from the 10 births that occurred at your facility over the course of the month. However, if you have more, don't take all of them, just take a random selection of 30. And so you might be thinking, well, how are we to take a random selection of 30 charts? Next slide. In the tool, what we've created is a mechanism that will help you to identify which charts to select in that random selection of 30. So if you are, say, have had 50 births in the last month, then in that blue box where the 30 is, instead you'll type 50. You'll click random sample, generate random sample. That's a button there. And then over in column C, it will tell you these are the charts that you should pull in order to have your random selection of 30. So in this example, it would say pull the first chart from the month, the second chart from the month, the third chart from the month, et cetera, et cetera. And those will be the charts that you pull out and that you'll start to do your audit on. Maybe if you've had 60 charts, it might instead say pull the first chart, then pull the fifth chart, then pull the 12th chart. And so you'll just pull those charts over the course of the month. And we've made it so that it's a random number for that process that will distribute your charts across the entire month. Next slide, please. One thing that's really important to note is when you download the Excel tools, you will need to click that enable content ribbon. Otherwise, it's not going to work. We've been working on writing some macros on the back end of Excel so that all of this will occur for you automatically. You'll need to click enable though in order for that to happen. We've worked out with our pilot hospitals that we've been partnering with over the past couple of years to make sure that these Excel tools can be used at sites across the country. So this should be usable for you. One of the things we're doing right now is we've added and taken out some questions. And so we're having to modify the code to make sure it all works again. So we're currently just doing some bug checking on that. Next slide, please. Once you've identified the charts that you need to pull, you'll click that purple button, enter chart audit data. Next slide. And this form is going to come up. And this will allow you then to enter in the information that's necessary for you to be able to track your progress on implementing the different clinical practices or as you move forward with implementing the 10 steps. So you'll click on that date of birth button. Next slide. And when you do, a calendar will pop up. You'll be able to select the date when the baby was born. Next slide. Oops, and it will populate into that white box there, the baby's birth date, and then you'll just start going through clicking the bubbles that correspond to that chart. So for example, the baby and the birthing parent remain together. The baby was not admitted to the NICU. You'll click that top button there, dyad remain together. Next slide. As you're going through, you'll be able to click information. For example, was baby exclusively fed human milk? You can click yes, no. Something I want to draw your attention to on, for example, item 6B, we identify specifically which standards the different questions relate to. So that question there, 6B, highlights this corresponds to standard 6.4. Rooming in, that corresponds to standard 7.1. That way you can cross-reference the chart with the guidelines if that's of interest to you. Again, just helping you to become familiar with the 10 steps and the different standards as we're moving along. Once you've entered in all of the information for that chart, there's a button on the bottom there that says add data, and then it will populate the information for you. Next slide. So all of these questions we have within the chart audit manual specific guidelines on when to mark yes for a question or when to mark no for a question and how each of those questions relate to the different standards. When you're first starting to use this chart audit tool, if you've never used it before, I would recommend, and we do recommend, that you have your manual beside you because you'll it'll help you to learn when something is following the practice, when something isn't. Over time, though, you might find yourself referring less and less often to that manual, and it will become more intuitive, and you'll start to internalize the content there. But at the start, we absolutely recommend having the manual there beside you. Next slide. We have another set of questions if the baby was admitted to the NICU. So I wanted to draw your attention there. Next slide. And so the questions for the NICU again are specific to that care. And so you'll go through a separate set of questions. Again, remembering this is only up to 10 charts that you'll want to do this for. Next slide. Once you've entered in all of the information for a month, on the bottom there, you'll see a tab that says Remain Together. You can click on that tab and a sheet will come up and it summarizes all of the data for that month for you. So for example, if you had reviewed 30 charts, you'll see up in the gray there, it says 30, and perhaps all 30 of the families had an indication that they had received prenatal breastfeeding instructions. That relates to step 3. Then you'd see 30 there in the yes, 0 for the no, 0 for the not applicable. Maybe 28 of those families had a vaginal birth, 2 had cesarean section. So you'd see 28 in vaginal, 2 for cesarean section. Next slide. If you're a more detail-oriented person and you want to double check the chart audits that you've done, and rather than looking at the summarized data, you want to look at each line of data specifically. We do have these review tabs, and there it will say this was chart number 5 that you pulled, and then you can see what the values were for that specific dyad for each of the measures that is relevant to you. You might choose to dig deeper into that, or you may choose not to, but we wanted to provide you with that opportunity if you wanted it. Next slide. So we also have the same piece of information, sets of information for NICU dyads. Next slide. And as well the NICU review, so you can look at the line level information. Next slide, please. So we've been working really hard to make a very similar chart audit tool for community health centers. It operates in virtually the same way. We're not going to go into as much detail for the community health center chart audit, largely because it's repetitive from the hospital chart audit data, but the process, the structure, the form is going to be identical to what we just talked about for hospitals. Next slide. So for the chart audits, again, you're going to want to make sure that you're choosing a sampling method that's appropriate for your center. So one example, maybe you want to pull all of the records that relate to prenatal postnatal care for families up to 2 years of age, because that better reflects the care that you provide families. Perhaps you only want to pull charts that relate to up to 6 months, because that's more indicative or more reflective of the care that your community health center provides. So we've built in this flexibility for you as well. We also recommend, similar to the hospital chart audits, that you pull 30 client records. And again, this is largely just because it provides a little bit more stable information. We're not going the whole researcher route of overkill, but we do want to make sure that we're getting a reflection of the practice that you're providing at your community health center. Next slide, please. So those both are chart audits. Those are capturing the stories of the care that your system documents within the charts. There's another set of stories that you're likely to be interested in, and that's to be listening directly to the families that you're providing care to. So the second sets of tools focus in on client surveys. We've created a community client survey where that you can give to families. We've also created a hospital client survey that you can give to birthing parents near the end of their birth hospital stay. What we're going to we're going to dive deep into the community client survey right now, and then give a more surface level overview of the hospital, because the hospital form is very similar to the community form. So we're just trying to be equal here. And now we're going to focus in on the community client survey. There's 2 versions for both community and hospital. There's a breastfed version of the survey. This is given to families where they've at least partially breastfed, if not fully breastfed or exclusively breastfed. We also have a second form that's given to families that have exclusively formula fed. And so we recommend that families complete the form and give it back to you. That way there's not any like pressure for them to say, oh yeah, I've breastfed, because they know that someone is looking directly at them while they're answering the questions. They might be a little bit more forthcoming about the care that they've received. Next slide. So this is the Word document form of how families will see it. So they'll answer questions like whether or not this is their first baby, how old their baby is today, remembering this is being given in community. And then you'll be able to, they'll just be able to answer the questions fairly straightforwardly with pen and pencil. Next slide, please. Once, can these be offered with 2 options for method, how to fill out paper online? Right now, we've only made a paper form for this. Great question, Claire. We haven't made an online form for this. One of the reasons for that is what we've seen, like there's privacy issues of needing to ensure that the data stay within a jurisdiction and don't end up on servers in other jurisdictions or other countries. So we've provided this to folks as a Word document for that reason, but it all depends on what your specific privacy information will allow. Yep, you can place this into REDCap if you have access to REDCap, for sure. So if you're going the paper, REDCap would be easier because then you won't need to do this next step. If you need to go by paper, once you've gotten all of the clients to fill out their surveys, we've created another form where you can enter this information in using a form. Next slide. So you'll again generate the random sample, and then you'll click the enter survey button. Next slide. And so the very first question on the form that you'll be getting is to identify whether or not the dyad breastfed, whether fully, exclusively, or partially breastfed, or if they exclusively formula fed. And that will take you to a series of questions either for form 1 or 2. Next slide. Next slide. And so you'll be able to just, oh, nope, yep, you'll be able to go in and answer the question. Similar to what we did with the chart audit. Next slide. We've connected each of these questions back to the specific standards so that you're able to always know which standards questions relate to. Next slide. At the end of the surveys, we have provided you the option to ask questions around racial and ethnic identity. What we very strongly encourage you to do is, before including these types of questions on your survey, make certain that you formed the appropriate partnerships with community so that the data are being used in a good way. So we really want to emphasize, underline, bold, the nothing about us without us principle. So partnering with the local First Nations or Inuit communities or Métis communities or newcomer communities in this work is really critical to centering their lived experiences as you move forward with supporting breastfeeding care. Once you've done that, next slide, you'll be able to click complete data entry and it will populate the forms for you automatically. Next slide. Similar to what we've done with the chart audits, we've created a summary sheet. It's going to pull up and summarize all of the information at an aggregate level. Next slide. And you can click that for both breastfed dyads as well as formula-fed dyads by selecting the tabs on the bottom of the Excel spreadsheet. Next slide. And so this is the breastfed infants information. So you'll be able to see how many got information about the importance of breastfeeding. You'll be able to see their age either in weeks or months, depending on how old the babies are when the parent completes the form. Next slide. And again, linking back to be able to document what proportion of your clients are receiving the care outlined by these standards. Next slide. We've done this also for the formula-fed dyads as well. Next slide. We have the same set of same type of tool for patients at the hospital, a hospital patient survey. Again, this is intended to center and track families' experiences with hospital practices. You'll do a random sample of birthing parents, just like a random sample of clients at the community health center. And we have 2 forms like we do for the community health center, a formula-fed form and a breastfed form. Next slide. And so all of these tools are really intended for you to be able to gather information, gather the story so that you can track your facilities progress, either your community health center or your hospital's progress towards implementing the 10 steps. It will allow you to get monthly information so that you can turn those into run charts. What we're going to do is over the next several months, there's a lot of information in each of these tools. There's also a lot of information that you can pull out so that you generate your own run charts. Jennifer is going to talk with you next about run charts, how to interpret them, how to think about them. We're going to give you webinars on how to turn the information we've just talked about collecting into run charts so you can continue to monitor your progress towards the 10 steps. I think at this point I hand it over to Jennifer now. Next slide.
Great, thank you, Nathan. Jennifer, are you good to go? Hopefully you see that slide there?
Yep, doing good.
Okay,
So thank you, Nathan. That was a lot of information in a short period of time, but I have to say that it's a really well-designed tool. And I saw in the chat some people testing to that have been working in the collaborative. So thank you for sharing it. Take a few minutes to talk about run charts. And Nathan showed through these tools how much data you can actually collect. And so what do you do with all this data? Well, remember that improvement is something that we're looking at to happen over time. You can take the data from the patient surveys, from staff surveys, and from those chart audits. So both qualitative and quantitative data will fit nicely into a run chart. And I'm going to describe what a run chart is if you haven't used one before. I'd love to see in the chat if how many of you have used a run chart, have seen a run chart, have no idea about a run chart. That's good and fine, because this will be a review for some and something new for some else of you. So run charts help us to really look at the effectiveness of our change. Remember, we're trying to make sure that our changes are improvement. They also help us determine where we can focus our improvement work and give us some direction to that, and also help us understand how our performance is going if we've implemented a change and we've stopped focusing on it with laser focus, but we want to make sure that the change isn't slipping. So it helps us monitor that change over time to ensure that it's sustaining. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a run chart. And I'm going to dissect this for you a little bit. So the y-axis is the units of measure. So it can be a percent, it can be a whole number, depends on what you're measuring. And then the x-axis is the time. So those dots are the data, and it runs over time. The blue line on the left-hand side chart and the green line on the right-hand side chart, they're the goal, the kind of where you started and where you want to go to. So on the left-hand side, the blue line is a median, and that's kind of like your average over time of how your changes or your data has bumped up and down across that. But on a level, that's where you've kind of seen. You don't see that going up in any way. You don't see it going down in any way. It's kind of staying the same. There are some simple rules, just a couple of them, that go with run charts. And one of them that I wanted to demonstrate that we often get that takes our breath away is what we call an astronomical point, where you're zipping along and you're kind of seeing that, you know, you have a trend, that you've been going in a certain direction, or you've been staying stable, and all of a sudden, one day, 1 week, 1 month, however often you're measuring your data, you have this data point that is just, or this number that comes in that is just way off the charts, and you're like, oh no, what is going on? The caution here is, don't react to that 1 month. Don't even react to 2 months in a run chart and in improvement work. If it is a value that you don't feel comfortable with for 3 or 4 months, that's when you start sitting down and saying, okay, we got to reset here. Things aren't working out well. Remember, this is improvement, and there's a lot of factors that enter into it. So that astronomical point, we don't want a knee-jerk reaction. We want to see what the next couple of months will do. On the right-hand side, this is an example of a chart that has a goal placed in it. So you may have a goal that you want to attain that is in your aim statement, or it's in, as in this situation, you have goals that are provided through the breastfeeding initiative, and you know you want to reach a certain goal for your practices, so you write that in, you put that into your run chart so you can see how you're progressing towards that goal. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a de-identified slide that came from our breastfeeding initiative, and this is that outcome measure of exclusive breastfeeding rate. So let's look at this. We've got the percentages of the rate of exclusive breastfeeding along that y-axis, and the time is every month. So the chart audits in our collaborative were done once a month. And how many charts do you review in a chart audit? In quality improvement, we often look at for this example of working with breastfeeding, how many clients do we have? How many deliveries do we have, depending where we land our feet? And so we can take a sample. We don't have to look at every single chart. We can take a sample, as little as 10 or as big as 30, depending on how large your volume is. And so this is, in the literature, what is representative. This sample is a representative of what's going on. And so here we see the blue line is the average of all the teams in the collaborative. The red line is an individual team. First 3 months, we always say, is our kind of our baseline, because we had to figure out how to collect the data. Sometimes it was a documentation issue, and so we had to give a couple of months to get organized and till we could get to the point where we felt the data that we were getting from the charts was pretty reflective of our practice. And so here, if you look at that red line, you can see how over time there's progress. So these started in around 50%. And then you see these last few months where we've got from the beginning of this year onward, really hovering around that goal, a little below it, a little above it some months, and see how there's fluctuation. That's normal, but you want to look at the trend over time, and the trend over time is huge improvement in their rate of exclusivity. Next slide, please. So I'm showing you this one because this ties into exclusive breastfeeding, which is moms that are breastfeeding and were given a supplementation of non-human milk for no medical reason. So this was an indicator we are tracking in the collaborative, but you see the direction goes in the opposite way of exclusivity. And so in the case of exclusive breastfeeding, you want that to increase. And of course, having supplementation that isn't breast milk that there was no medical reason for, you want that to go down. So here you can see again, the red line is the individual team, and you can see still some up and down at the beginning, and then they started to really click in, and over time you can see how that has gradually decreased for them, which is great news. How do you share this data? When you look at a run chart, the reason I love run charts, or have come to love run charts, is because it's easy to understand. You don't have to be a data guru to understand, to really understand what's going on here. It's very well labeled. The visual is easy to see. And when you have 2 or 3 people standing around a run chart, because you are going to share them with everyone that this impacts, everyone that's working on this, they can stand around and have a conversation saying, oh, look at where we're improving. You get to the point where sometimes staff actually say, what happened this month? And that's when you're going to remind them that it's a trend that we're looking for in a direction of goodness or in a direction we don't want it to go. And then we're going to celebrate, or we're going to talk about some new change ideas to make things turn around. Next slide, please. I want to talk a bit about data collectors. I want to first acknowledge and thank the data collectors in this collaborative. We could not have had the results we have without these data collectors, because they have shared the data and encourage staff and the planning team over time in each of the hospitals. And so here's some tips for how you identify those data collectors and how you encourage them along the way. Over time, I've found that it's really important to have at least 2 people that are collecting data. Why? Because it's never good to have one person that owns all the information or all the knowledge. What if someone goes on holiday, or God forbid is out on sick leave? Then you have someone else that can pitch in. It's also important, we've seen, to think about who that person is that's collecting the data. Often someone that is part of the peer group that is going to be making the change, or it's affecting their practice. Those are good people to have as the data collectors, because they trust them. They understand how things work. And so when they bring them the data that people are like, I can't believe that's what you got from the chart audit, then the staff that you work with can say, yeah, I'm the data collector, and that is what it looks like. It's this great, or it's this not so great. And so really being able to strategically think about who those data collectors can be, and how relatable they are to the people that are making the changes. Sharing the data is really important. It gives the data collectors a sense of pride and values their role, but most importantly, it shares the progress over time so people can see what they're involved in. You've already showed them the aim and where you want to go. And also for leadership, being able to transfer that up the leadership chain so that they can see the changes you're making, so they can continue to support the time that it takes to collect data, and also the resources to make the improvement happen. Next slide, please. So key takeaways from the quality improvement conversations that we've had today, and how you can help operationalize some of this work to improve your breastfeeding outcomes. Set an aim, very, very important, we've talked about. Measure what is meaningful for the improvement, also meaningful for staff, and meaningful for leadership. What is meaningful for leadership might not be the same as what's meaningful for staff, but think about having both. PDSAs do not have to be cause PTSD. If you make them simple, you do them quickly, and you really look at them as learning in your learning quality environment. Collecting and sharing data is so key to improvement. Don't hold it close to your chest. Run charts make it easy for people to understand and easy to populate your data over time. And it can really be a source of joy. And I want to say that quality improvement can be fun. So remember to make it fun and interject that in as you can. I'll turn it over to Kathy now, and she's going to share some more resources for you.
Thanks, Jennifer and Nathan. I think we need to take a big breath after all of that incredible information, and thank you both. You know, I'm grateful for the kind hearts and the very wise minds that have pulled all of these tools together, because it saves us so much work at the grassroots level, and it really makes the project work that we do, the implementation of the initiative, valuable in terms of its ability to be shared amongst our colleagues from that multidisciplinary collaborative group that we're trying to influence out there. So from the perspective of someone working at that grassroots level, I want to say that all of those tools really are not that difficult to learn. If I can learn how to use them, I can assure you that you can also. So get stuck in there and take a big breath first, though, and then build your toolkit. And that's the little piece that I'd like to contribute today. Before I do, though, I just wanted you to know that I am speaking to you from Milton, which is part of the Halton region. And that's the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, part of the Anishinaabe Nation. And it stretches all the way from the Niagara Peninsula through the Greater Toronto area, eastwards across to the Rouge River Valley. And at the moment, it is beautiful. It's gold and red and yellow, and everything is looking marvelous right now, as Nathan said earlier. We're very grateful to live here. Okay, so starting with all of the tools, part of our toolkit, as we all worry so much about, is that step 2, which is staff education. And when we have a look at the tools that we've been presented with, you've seen them right now from the beginning of this presentation. We started off looking at the new implementation guideline. I always print my stuff off because I have to have paper. But the implementation guideline from WHO is there. Our other tools include the competency document, which is up on our slide right now, also from WHO. But to start off with, I would highly recommend that you download our BCC tool, our implementation guideline, because as Nathan showed you going through his slides, in that tool, you have your live links to these documents. And that makes life so much easier when you are limited in your space and your office is cluttered and you're trying to keep yourself organized to know, what are my tools to get started with? Where do I go to from here? So the toolkit, which WHO put out, really does help us to assess staff competencies. It looks out for us, what do our staff need to know? And it explains to us how we can go about making sure that our staff know the things they need to know. So instead of being focused on specific curricula now and hours of education, we're looking at proving competencies. So the Breastfeeding Committee for Canada really urges you to find sources of staff education that are supportive of the Baby Friendly Initiative in every way, but there are so many different opportunities out there. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our competency verification toolkit, we have a parallel toolkit for the community as well, just because we wanted to make sure that everything, of course, in Canada that we do for hospital, we try to do for community as well as part of the continuum of care. And what we are looking at there are, our competency framework is described. We have our indicator document, which is reflected in our implementation guideline. And then we can go a little bit deeper and we can have a look at what are we doing right. So we've got our questions and our checklists and our case scenarios. All of these things are built in. Let's have a little bit of a closer look, Michelle, with the next slide. So looking at the different types of educational opportunities that are out there, the BCC doesn't endorse any particular educational offering, but what we have done to support all of the tools that are a part of this package is to highlight for you some sources of education that fall within the parameters of BFI. So on the BCC website, you can find this document which has the live links to various types of resources for education. And if you go to the top just a little bit slowly, because I'm aged and I cannot follow so closely, thank you, Michelle. What I'd like you to see is that right at the beginning of that document, you have your main documents, your toolkit documents. So the competency tools there, and our community toolkit is there. And then as you go down, you will see that the direct care provider educational resources, there are a couple of them there. And just to highlight a few, throughout the collaborative project, we've put together a few little offerings that might be helpful. A little bit further down, you will see that we also have resources that have been recommended from the University of British Columbia. And as an educator and what am I looking at? I'm looking for the words for this. As an information junkie, what I want you to know is that when you go into this document, do go and look at all of these tools. Different types of education appeal to us differently, and you'll see such a variety of presentations there. They are brilliant. Really go have a look. You do not have to reinvent the wheel, and the ones that are in this resource are free. So you have some designed for direct care staff, you have some that are designed for physicians, and you have the global health media resources as well, which were created by WHO conglomerate of interest groups, and they can reflect for your facility, for your public, for your community, all kinds of different scenarios, but all really good, evidence-based, simply presented, beautifully presented, with different cultural perspectives as well. A little bit further down there, you will find that we have for physicians very quick modules, but we also have an app that was developed here in Ontario by Dr. Catherine Pound, which physicians can upload, and they will get a quick down and dirty directional tool to be able to help them in the short amount of time that they often have to spend with parents to help them troubleshoot. The other piece of this document that's included are some really lovely resources that come to us from the Northwest Territories that are related to breastfeeding, and they are around cultural safety and some of the traditional practices related to breastfeeding. And what we would like to ask is that if you have identified other resources, please to let us know, because we would like to let this list grow. And so especially we would like to put a call out if there are any French resources too, because at the moment these things are for us all in English, the ones on this list right now. So our colleagues in Quebec will no doubt have they have created and just released their own set of documents, and I know that they will have links within those documents to some French resources as well. But it's so newly released that we haven't included them in this list as yet. So think about where to start, and a good workman always starts by gathering their tools. You know what those tools are. They're very easily accessible on the BCC website, so go download all your stuff and then decide on, take a look at your implementation guideline from the Breastfeeding Committee for Canada, because it really clearly leads you through step by step the different domains that you need to look at. Your standards are there. Your checklist is there to make sure that you are checking off your standards as you accomplish those competencies. And then you have these brilliant tools that have been designed that make our lives so much easier and make the outcome of our work so much more celebratory instead of, punitive. And people are always worried about the fact that we collect data because we are looking for fault. We're collecting data to build on our strengths, and I feel, especially from a nurse point of view, it's up to that grassroots person to put good data in to our notes so that we can actually do that quality improvement piece and to use that information, those lovely run charts, as a celebration point to be able to encourage people to keep going. Oftentimes we are in such a hurry to document that we don't we don't truly reflect the situation that we are working with. So you will find that if you start taking a little bit more care about teaching staff the value of documenting accurately, your medically indicated supplements are better reflected, and it reflects your demographic, and it helps your staff to realize that you're doing a good job, you're supplementing for truly valid reasons, and we're able to present that in a way that's very supportive generally. So that's what I would like to end off with. And before I hand it over, thank you so much to all of you for this last week. It's been very invigorating and enriching and a blessing in all sorts of ways. Now, Michelle, I know I would have left a whole bunch of things out. So
No.
please, would you all chip in now and make sure that we've covered all the ground that we wanted to cover?
Terrific, Kathy. Thank you so much. And I think you have covered off all the main points, as well as Jennifer and Nathan. I'm so fortunate and have so much gratitude for the teams that participated in the National Collaborative to help us create and adapt these tools. And hopefully all the collaborative participants who have signed on today also see value, because they will be able to use these tools beyond the actual formal project timeline, which is the end of December. So hopefully all of you that these tools are new to you, you can certainly reach out to us to kind of learn. And if you have questions, we are going to be in a phase where we want to continue to scale up BFI implementation in Canada. And so for those of you who are wanting to use these tools, learn more about our implementation guideline, we want to hear from you. So either you contact myself or go through the contact us email on the BCC website. We would love to hear from you. Our community health tools are new. We haven't used them in the project. And so Nathan and I in particular are really keen to hear back from you. Do these questions make sense? Should they be worded a little differently? So we want your feedback. So once they get released, we hope to continue to offer up more specific webinars on how to use the tools and how to make the run charts. We didn't want to overwhelm you today. But I also want to let you know that the parent partners, don't forget them in all of this, because you get kind of caught up in the science of data collection, and parent partners can be extremely helpful in designing questions, but also actually administering the patient survey tools. And they have been very helpful, especially when they were able to go on site within the facilities to help administer the tools themselves and help, especially if anybody needed help with reading or answering the questions. So please don't forget the parent partners. And I just wanted to say a few logistical things before I hand it back to Claire and Candy to kind of do our final wrap up, that I will be emailing all of you with the links to today's recording. Those of you who are registered participants of the symposium, you will get the recordings in an email, and all of the slides from the symposium will be posted on our website in both English and French. So that's upcoming. And as I pass it back to Claire and Candy, I want you to figure out if you know how to use the clapping hands, please do so, because Claire and Candy have been fantastic ambassadors and role models to MC our symposium, and they are a representation of what parent partners can do out there. And so I hope you continue to engage your parent partners where you live locally. Many thanks back to Monica and all the presenters. So Claire, I know, has another slide to just share and to do our final wrap up. And maybe you will want to kind of touch on any of the comments in the chat box because I couldn't see them when I had my slide shared. So back to Claire and Candy.
Hi everyone. I'm just getting my slide up here, and Michelle, you'll have to tell me when you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it now. Perfect.
Coming up. Okay, great. So thanks so much to Michelle and the BCC and the PT committee for inviting us to be MCs at this event. As I've said, it's just been a real honor and a real demonstration of how the Breastfeeding Committee for Canada is demonstrating and turning into action that theme for this week, which is the protect, promote, support breastfeeding and BFI, a shared responsibility. And really, actually, I feel many, all of the presentations this week have been a demonstration of that shared responsibility of everything from the multidisciplinary team that Kathy Venter spoke about, all the way through to Lucy Barney's presentation about trauma-informed care for Indigenous families, and just so many groups of people that we need to make BFI work. So I'm just going to, we have the slide up here, so I'll just mention that, and then there are a couple of comments in the chat, but I don't know how much, I can't tell how much time we have with the slide on my screen, but this is just, I put this up yesterday, but I wanted to make you all aware that this is a webinar that's upcoming. There I am looking serious with my baby in Nova Scotia, but this is a topic that I think has maybe never been more pertinent, which is it's breastfeeding and mental health, and what is the connection. And so this is a webinar that came out of conversations we had during the BFI collaborative. So it's myself and two of our parent partners on our collaborative are presenting this webinar, along with Lori McPherson, who's a staff member at the Canadian Mental Health Association in Winnipeg. And so you can see on the screen what's involved, and it will be really, very much led by the parent voice and offered to anyone in Canada. As you see, it's virtual, free to attend. This is up on the BCC website, so you're welcome to go there and register. There's also a link here in the forum. And thanks very much to Michelle for supporting this webinar, as well as Louise Clement, who's on our planning team of the collaborative, has been a part of the working group for this webinar. So I'm very excited about it, and we have a lot of wonderful content, and I'm hoping to get all kinds of diverse groups of healthcare professionals and parents coming to it. So maybe I'll stop sharing my screen, Michelle, and we can touch on a couple of the questions in the chat. There were a couple of interesting points and that I did want to bring up. There was a question recently about modules. Do any centers require staff to do modules before hiring on maternal child units? So I don't know if anyone can speak to that, or if you are aware of that, Michelle.
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, I have seen where people even require some education prior to even hiring, but that's not always feasible given the staff that's available in their area, whether that's feasible to attract someone that already brings that education and knowledge with them. But for sure, I think through what they call learning management systems, the different facilities have different types of ways to disseminate education, and whether they already have modules. I certainly know at the IWK Health Center where I used to work, we developed modules, and so I think the other facilities have certainly done that. But we don't, from the BCC, have kind of canned packages of those modules to share out. But certainly contacting others, that's the beauty of collaboration, contacting others to see if they have modules and if they're willing to share. It makes life a lot easier.
And as I just noticed, Marg LaSalle has pointed out in the chat that direct care providers are no longer, of course, required to complete the 20-hour course, but they need to take a course to help knowledge base. But assessors look for competency and not number of education hours. So that's a good point and true, but perhaps just for sort of general knowledge, it's a good point. Yeah, so many comments. I mean, just as the other days, and this is, looking at sustainability and future plans, which we are talking about right now in the BFI Collaborative. Maggie in BC says, as we wind up, this collaboration allowed hospitals across Canada to ask questions and communicate and share resources. It was invaluable as a similar platform being considered for BCC.
Well, and yeah, that's a really good question. So we're going to harvest all the great learning from the collaborative, and so that's in the plans. But we'd love to hear from what you would want to see. Tell us, what do you want it to look like? We've used the Teams platform as a way to kind of share and collaborate using the kind of posting messages or asking questions. We've also used webinars to do that. So yeah, we're open to your feedback because we would like to see what you would want to have happen. And we've got some experience with this. So yeah, please let us know what you want to see continued for those that are in the collaborative project, but those that are new, that haven't been part of the project, what would you like to be involved in and learn from the BCC?
I myself put a prompting question in the chat, and if anyone has any thoughts, feel free to email us or answer in the chat. But I wasn't sure if there were any centers had adopted a system where you take thoughts and reflections from patient surveys or other forms of patient feedback and use those to inform quality improvement efforts. So I don't know if anyone has experience with that in terms of where you start with quality improvement. Is there capacity to start with thoughts
Absolutely.
from patients?
I hope someone from the collaborative teams could chime in there and say that very much so. I believe the teams have used the patient survey data and information. We've designed it primarily as kind of yes/no questions, so for it's easy for data collection. But you can certainly add in a comment section or where you can actually get quotes directly from families. But yeah, anybody from the project have any specific examples that you could share on that? Please put it in the chat. It'd be great.
Lori says, always trying to think of ways to use these stories for informing. There are so many ways to gather feedback and then ways to implement change. I mean, certainly ideas have come from parent partners on our collaborative for implementing change in the unit. I guess I'm curious about a more wide-ranging approach where you have pull from kind of a multiplicity of types of patient feedback for improvement efforts. Maggie says they did a comment section in the survey.
Claire, I
Yes.
wanted to share a comment that I heard, and it was in reference to changing people's minds about the current events that we have around the vaccine. But it was a researcher, and he said that all the different ways and reasons that you can present to people, the things that really change minds or influence people are stories. And so any way that we can get stories from staff, get stories from mothers and families, that really helps to promote change in even people who have no intention of changing.
Yes, it's the personal piece coming in for sure. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm just seeing a comment in the chat from Johanna, and she says, tell us more about patient-parent partners. Well, I'm happy to share. So actually, Joanna, yesterday, Candy and I and our colleague Sarah Weatherall, the parent partner, did a presentation all about engaging parents, and it will be sent around next week with the other recordings. So that gives a sort of a grounding, one perspective of beginning the process of engaging parent partners in your hospital teams. So that could be useful for you, Joanna.
Just to clarify, it'll be sent around to those that were registered to the symposium, the recording, but the slides will be made available on the BCC website.
Thank you, Michelle. Great.
Yeah. So we're just almost a couple minutes before the hour, Claire. So and Candy. So maybe we can do our final wrap up. Be wonderful.
I don't actually have much to add to what has already been said, and all of the kudos and comments in the chat. It seems like everything was well received and people really enjoyed and found the presentations really informative, as did I. And so with that, I just actually like to thank all of you for sharing a cup of tea with us today, or maybe several over the past week. It has been a pleasure to be here. I have enjoyed everything, and I look forward to the next one in 2023.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for signing in. Have a great long weekend. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.